The notification chimed with an electronic crispness that cut through the quiet hum of the late afternoon city. It was a sound Liam had configured himself, a specific alert tied to a single credit card, one he rarely used. He was sitting in his minimalist home office, the scent of rain-washed concrete and damp earth rising from the open balcony window. A half-finished schematic for a low-income housing project lay across his desk, its clean lines a testament to a passion he was told he had failed at. He glanced at his phone. The notification wasn't a warning of fraud, but a simple transaction alert. The Grand Elysian Hotel, $4, 87250. Presidential suite, room service, spa package. Liam stared at the name of the hotel. His hotel, the flagship property of the portfolio he had spent a decade building in secret. He felt not a surge of anger, but a profound, chilling stillness. The transaction was authorized. The card was his supplementary card, the one issued to his wife, Chloe. She thought it was just a high-limit card from a bank that still, for some reason, considered him creditworthy. She had no idea it was a corporate account linked directly to the parent company that owned the Grand Elysian. She was checking into his hotel with another man, using his money. The sheer, unmitigated arrogance of it was breathtaking. It was a move born of such complete and utter contempt that it bordered on the surreal. She didn't just think he was a fool. She was so certain of it that she didn't even feel the need to be careful. He leaned back in his chair, the worn leather groaning softly. He could picture her now, sweeping into the marble lobby, her laughter echoing just a little too loudly, handing over the sleek black card with a flick of her wrist, a gesture of casual ownership. She would be with the man she'd been mentioning for weeks, Julian, the brilliant, dynamic investor who was everything Liam apparently was not. Chloe would feel powerful, in control, oblivious. And in that moment, Liam knew this wasn't just an infidelity. It was a symptom of a deeper sickness, a rot of disrespect that had been festering for years. He had endured the casual dismissals, the thinly veiled pity from her family, the constant, grinding narrative of his failure. He had borne it all with a patient dignity, waiting for the right moment. He just never imagined she would be the one to hand-deliver it to him, gift-wrapped in luxury and contempt. The phone in his hand felt heavy, no longer a simple device, but a detonator. The pin had been pulled. All he had to do was decide when to let go. This singular act of careless disdain would set off a chain of events Chloe and her family never saw coming. They thought they knew him. They thought he was a broken man, a failed architect living off the dregs of a forgotten dream. They didn't know the truth. Within 7 days, their entire world, built on a foundation of arrogance and inherited wealth, would be brought down to the studs. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for this story. It's one that I think a lot of you will connect with, especially if you've ever felt underestimated or unappreciated. Before we dive into how this all unraveled, do me a quick favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. And just for fun, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. All right, let's get back to it. To really understand the weight of that hotel charge, you need to understand the world Liam had been living in. The world was a dinner party, held 2 months prior at the sprawling, ostentatiously modern home of his in-laws, Richard and Eleanor Vance. The house was an architectural monstrosity of glass and white stone that Liam, in his professional opinion, found cold and soulless. It was designed to impress, not to comfort. Much like its owners, Liam sat at the long, polished mahogany table, a ghost in his own life. The air was thick with the scent of roasted lamb and Eleanor's expensive, cloying perfume. The conversation, as it always did, revolved around money, status, and the accomplishments of Chloe's older brother, Marcus. The Kensington deal is finally closed, Marcus announced, puffing out his chest. He was a man who had inherited his father's position at the family's lucrative import-export firm and wore it like a military uniform he hadn't earned. Pulled it out of the fire at the last minute. The board was getting nervous, but I told them, you have to spend money to make money. Oh, Marcus, you're just like your father, Eleanor cooed, her eyes shining with maternal pride. She was a woman sculpted by years of social climbing, her face a mask of pleasant indifference that barely concealed a sharp, judgmental nature. So decisive. Richard, his father-in-law, merely grunted in affirmation, swirling the deep red wine in his glass. Richard was the silent enabler, a man whose inaction was a form of passive aggression. He would never insult Liam directly. He would simply allow his wife and son to do it for him, his silence serving as tacit agreement. Chloe, seated beside Liam, placed a hand on his arm. It was not a gesture of affection, but of performative pity. "That's wonderful, Marcus. It must be so exciting, closing deals like that." She then turned to Liam, her voice taking on a tone of gentle, condescending concern that was far more insulting than any overt attack. "Liam was just telling me about a new project he's designing." The table fell quiet. All eyes turned to him. It was a familiar pattern, a conversational trap Chloe set with practiced ease. She would offer him up for sacrifice, a small, sad animal to be prodded and examined by the predators of the table. "Oh," Eleanor said, her perfectly arched eyebrows rising a fraction of an inch. "Are you back with the firm now, Liam? I thought after your little venture, you decided to take some time off." His little venture was the boutique architectural firm he had started 5 years ago, which had, by all public accounts, folded after just 2 years. It was the centerpiece of their narrative about him. Liam, the dreamer. Liam, the failure. He kept his voice even, betraying nothing of the cold fury coiling in his gut. "It's a personal project, a design competition for a new community arts center." Marcus let out a short, derisive laugh. "A competition? Heavens, Liam. Are we back in university? What's the prize? A gift certificate and a pat on the back." "Marcus, be nice," Chloe chided, though her eyes were twinkling with amusement. She squeezed Liam's arm again, harder this time. "It's for a good cause. It's charitable work, really." The word charitable hung in the air, redefined as unpaid and unimportant. It was the final nail in the coffin of his perceived worthlessness. He wasn't a provider, a man of action like Marcus. He was a hobbyist, a man who dabbled in charity because he couldn't succeed in the real world. Liam felt a familiar, dull ache behind his ribs. He said nothing. He simply reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, his fingers brushing against a cool, metallic object. It was a small, worn architect's scale rule made of silver-plated brass. It was a gift from his own father, a carpenter, given to him when he was first accepted into architecture school. It represented a different world, a world of tangible things, of honest work and quiet pride. It was his symbolic shield, a reminder of a foundation they couldn't see and would never understand. He looked across the table at Chloe. She was smiling, basking in her brother's wit, completely at ease with the casual evisceration of her husband's dignity. She had no idea that the failed firm she so easily dismissed hadn't folded at all. It had evolved. It had gone underground, restructured as a holding company for a commercial real estate empire that was, at that very moment, in the final stages of acquiring the primary lender for her father's company. He looked at her, at all of them, so confident in their glass house, and he felt the first stirrings of not just justice, but of a carefully engineered, perfectly symmetrical form of poetic justice. He held onto his scale rule, the cold metal a promise of the reckoning to come. The dinner ended as it always did, with Liam feeling erased, and with them feeling smugly superior, secure in their delusions. They had no idea they were dining with the man who was about to become their architect of ruin. The day after the hotel charge appeared, Liam did not confront Chloe. He did not yell or demand answers. A direct confrontation was a tool of the emotionally incontinent, a messy, unpredictable affair that left too much to chance. Liam was an architect, a strategist. He built things to last, and that included his plans for retribution. His first call was not to a lawyer, but to Anya Sharma, the general manager of the Grand Elysian. Anya had been with him since the beginning. She had started as a junior project manager at his supposedly failed firm, one of the few who saw his vision and believed in it. When he had pivoted, using the firm as a front to quietly acquire undervalued commercial properties. She had become his most trusted lieutenant. She was sharp, discreet, and fiercely loyal. "Anya," he said, his voice calm as he paced his office. "I have a delicate situation." "Always, Mr. Sterling," she replied, her voice warm but professional. He was Liam in private, but Mr. Sterling on a recorded line. They had their protocols. "How can I help?" "My wife, Chloe Sterling, checked into the presidential suite at the Elysian yesterday. Room 2801. She is with a guest." There was a fractional pause on the other end of the line. Anya was too professional to comment, but she understood the implications immediately. "I see. What are your instructions?" "I want them to have the best experience of their lives," Liam said, and he could almost hear Anya's surprise. "Whatever they want, they get. Champagne, spa treatments, private dining. Comp it all. Do not, under any circumstances, let them see a bill. I want them to feel like royalty. I want them to believe they are untouchable." "Understood, Mr. Sterling. Total hospitality, all charges rerouted to the corporate account." "Exactly. But I also want documentation. Everything. Every room service order, every spa booking, every valet ticket. I want a complete folio of their activities, time-stamped. And Anya, I need to know who her guest is. His name is Julian. I want to know everything about him. His full name, what he does, who he knows. Use our resources. Be thorough, but be invisible. Consider it done," Anya said, the steel returning to her voice. "I'll have a preliminary background report for you by end of day." "Thank you, Anya. You're invaluable. I just work for a man who values loyalty, sir." After the call, Liam walked away from the schematics of the Arts Center and into a different room, one Chloe never entered. It was his real office. Where the home office was minimalist and unassuming, this room was a command center. A bank of 6 monitors glowed with stock tickers, property management software, and encrypted communication channels. A large wall-mounted screen displayed a world map dotted with glowing pins, each one representing a property owned by his holding company. Ethelred Holdings, a name so boringly corporate it was practically invisible. This was his secret. The narrative of his failure was the most brilliant piece of architecture he had ever designed. After his small firm had won a massive, quiet settlement from a development conglomerate that had tried to steal one of his designs, Liam hadn't broadcast his victory. He had used the capital to disappear. He let the world think he had been crushed. He let Chloe and her family build their story of his incompetence. Meanwhile, he had been buying. First, a small commercial building in a struggling downtown district. Then another. He specialized in properties others saw as liabilities, using his architectural expertise to see the hidden potential. He retrofitted, redesigned, and repurposed, turning forgotten buildings into profitable assets. Ethelred Holdings now owned over 100 properties across North America and Europe, including the entire Grand Elysian hotel chain, which he had acquired a year ago. Chloe thought his income came from a few lucky stock market investments his late father had left him, a dwindling trust that explained their comfortable but not extravagant lifestyle. She had no concept of the scale of his success. She saw the quiet, unassuming man and assumed the life he led was the sum of his ambition. By late afternoon, Anya's report arrived in his encrypted inbox. Julian Croft, not an investor, but a high-end real estate broker with a history of inflated deals and leveraged credit. He drove a leased Maserati, lived in a mortgaged condo, and his entire persona was a carefully curated illusion of wealth. The report included a detail that made Liam pause. Julian's biggest current project, the one he was likely using to impress Chloe, was brokering the sale of a mid-sized logistics company. Vance Imports, her father's company. Julian was trying to land a commission by selling the Vance family business, and based on the whispers Anya had picked up, he was promising them a valuation that was wildly unrealistic. Liam stared at the name on the screen. Vance Imports. He pulled up another file on his monitor. It was the portfolio of a private equity firm Ethelred had acquired 3 months ago, and on their list of pending acquisitions was a small, over-leveraged logistics company they were about to purchase for pennies on the dollar after its primary lender called in its debt. Vance Imports. The pieces clicked into place with the beautiful, cold precision of a locked tumbler. Julian wasn't just Chloe's lover. He was a vulture circling her family, promising a feast while planning to pick their bones clean. And Chloe, blinded by his superficial charm and her own desperate need for a winner, was leading him right to the dinner table. Liam felt a wave of something colder than anger. It was a sense of grim purpose. This was no longer just about a cheating wife. It was about protecting a legacy, however flawed, and dismantling a house of cards before it fell on its own. He would let Julian and Chloe have their fantasy for a few more days. He would let them drink the champagne and enjoy the views from the penthouse. He would let them believe they were the masters of the universe, because the higher he let them climb, the more devastating their fall would be. The days that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare, executed with the quiet precision of a surgeon. From his command center, Liam watched the drama unfold. Anya's reports were meticulous, painting a vivid picture of Chloe and Julian's stay at the Elysian. They were living a fantasy, ordering vintage champagne for breakfast, indulging in couples massages, and running up a tab that would have crippled a small business. All of it was silently absorbed by Liam's corporate account. He instructed Anya to send a complimentary bottle of Dom Perignon rose to their suite with a simple, anonymous card. Enjoy your stay, he imagined Chloe's delight, assuming it was a perk from a fawning hotel manager, a testament to her own importance. Meanwhile, the humiliation in Liam's own home escalated. Chloe would return from her business meetings flushed with excitement, her eyes shining with a mixture of condescension and pity for the man she was leaving behind in her wake. One evening, she breezed into the living room where Liam was reading, tossing a shopping bag from a designer boutique onto the sofa. "Julian took me to see the new penthouse listings at the waterfront," she announced, her voice casual, but the statement was a carefully aimed dart. "God, Liam, you can't imagine the views. It makes this place feel like a shoebox." This shoebox was a spacious, thoughtfully designed home that Liam had designed himself, a place he had once believed would be their forever home. "I'm sure it's impressive," he said, not looking up from his book. Her eyes narrowed at his lack of reaction. She needed him to be jealous, to be wounded. His calm was an insult to her power. He's about to close the biggest deal of his career. "The commission alone will be more than your firm made in its entire existence." She paused, letting the cruelty land. "He wants me to redecorate the new place. He says I have a natural eye for luxury." Liam turned a page. "That's nice," he murmured. He knew from his surveillance of Julian's finances that the man was 3 months behind on his condo association fees and had recently had a credit card declined. The penthouse was a fiction, a stage for his performance. The final, most galling humiliation came a day before Liam planned to set his trap. Some old friends of theirs, another couple named Mark and Sarah, had invited them out for dinner. Chloe had insisted on going and had also insisted on inviting Julian. "It's time people met him," she'd said, a clear challenge in her eyes. "I can't keep him a secret forever." The dinner was an excruciating ordeal. Julian was everything Liam was not: loud, ostentatious, and dripping with a counterfeit confidence. He told exaggerated stories of business triumphs, name-dropping celebrities and CEOs. Chloe hung on his every word, her adoring gaze a constant, public repudiation of her husband. "Liam here is an architect," Chloe said to Julian at one point, a familiar, saccharine-sweet poison in her voice. "Or he's more of a thinker now. He designs things for competitions." Julian clapped Liam on the shoulder with patronizing bonhomie. "Hey, nothing wrong with that, buddy. The world needs dreamers. Me, I'm a doer. While you guys are drawing the buildings, I'm the one selling them for 8 figures." He laughed a loud, braying sound. "To each his own, right?" Mark and Sarah exchanged an uncomfortable glance, unsure how to react to the raw, open disrespect. Liam simply smiled, a serene, almost beatific expression on his face. He looked at Julian, this hollow man in a rented suit, and at Chloe, his wife, who was so blinded by the cheap glitter she couldn't see the abyss opening at her feet. You're absolutely right, Julian, Liam said, his voice so gentle it was disarming. It's important to know what you're good at. Inside, Liam was a storm of ice. He knew that Julian's big deal, the sale of Vance Imports, was a complete fabrication. His own team had already initiated the final stages of the acquisition through the company's debt. The notices would be going out in 48 hours. Julian wasn't brokering a sale. He was about to be steamrolled by one. He was a fly buzzing around a feast, unaware that the spider was already descending. Later that night, after they returned home, Chloe stood in the doorway of his office. "You were very quiet tonight," she said. It was an accusation. "I was listening," he replied. "Julian really likes you," she said, a blatant lie. "He thinks you're a decent guy, just a little lost. He said he might even have some work for you. Some drafting, maybe, to help you get back on your feet." This was the pinnacle, the final, unbearable insult. The offer of charity from her lover, a man who was himself a walking fraud. This was the moment, the quiet before the storm reached its peak stillness. The air grew heavy, pregnant with the unspoken. Liam slowly closed his book and placed it on the table. He looked up at her, and for the first time in a long time, he let her see a flicker of the man he truly was. His gaze was not angry, not hurt. It was cold, clear, and analytical, like a geologist assessing a rock face for fractures before planting the dynamite. "Chloe," he said, his voice a low murmur, "I think it's time we had a serious talk about our future. All of us. Why don't you invite your parents and Marcus for dinner tomorrow night? And please, bring Julian. I think it's important he's there too. We can book the private dining room at the Grand Elysian. My treat." Chloe was taken aback, both by the suggestion and the venue. She saw it as a capitulation, a white flag. He was finally acknowledging the reality of the situation and was willing to spend extravagantly to do it. "The Elysian? Are you sure we can afford that?" she asked, a smirk playing on her lips. "Don't worry about it," Liam said, his smile never reaching his eyes. "I'll take care of everything." She left, triumphant. She thought she was walking into her victory celebration. Liam picked up his phone and made one last call to Anya. "It's time," he said. "The Sovereign Room. Tomorrow night at 8. I need the full presentation package ready. And I need hotel security on standby." Discreetly. "Everything is in place, Mr. Sterling," Anya replied. "The stage is set." Liam hung up and looked out at the city lights. The storm was about to break. The Sovereign Room at the Grand Elysian was the hotel's most exclusive space. It was not merely a room, but a statement of power. Paneled in dark, polished walnut, with a single, massive marble table at its center, it offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the city skyline through a floor-to-ceiling wall of glass. Tonight, the city lights glittered like a carpet of scattered diamonds, oblivious to the human drama about to unfold before them. Liam arrived first. He stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, a figure of calm authority against the glittering backdrop. He wore a simple, impeccably tailored dark suit. He looked less like a failed architect and more like the man who owned the view. Anya had already been there. On the marble table, 6 leather-bound folders were arranged with geometric precision, one at each place setting. Chloe and her entourage arrived exactly at 8. They entered not as guests, but as a conquering army. Marcus led the way, swaggering, his eyes scanning the room with an appraiser's disdain. Eleanor followed, her posture rigid, a silent judgment on the decor, the service, the very air she was breathing. Richard trailed behind them, his face a familiar mask of weary indifference. Then came Chloe, on Julian's arm. She was radiant, dressed in a vibrant red dress that demanded attention. She looked at Liam by the window and gave him a smile of pure, pitying triumph. This was it, the moment her dull, provincial husband was forced to confront the dazzling new reality of her life. "Well, Liam," Marcus began, foregoing any greeting as he pulled out a chair. "I must say, you're certainly going out with a bang. What's this going to set you back? Half of your remaining trust fund." "Marcus, please," Eleanor chided weakly, though she was clearly thinking the same thing. "Let's just have a civilized dinner," Richard mumbled, sinking into a chair and immediately focusing on the wine list, his preferred method of avoiding conflict. Liam turned from the window, his expression unreadable. "Thank you all for coming. Please sit." He gestured to the table. He remained standing. Chloe guided Julian to the seat directly opposite Liam, a strategic placement. He was her champion, her exhibit. "Liam, you know Julian, of course," she said, her voice dripping with significance. "We've met," Liam said, his eyes briefly meeting Julian's. Julian gave him a smug, confident nod. He believed he was there to witness Liam's formal surrender. "I'm glad you could make it, Julian," Liam continued, his tone perfectly even. "What you have to say is an important part of this conversation." They all sat, a tangible sense of anticipation settling over the table. They expected a plea. They expected tears, perhaps. A desperate last-ditch attempt to win Chloe back, or a bitter negotiation over assets. Liam did not sit. He remained at the head of the table, a position of authority he now occupied without apology. He let the silence stretch, amplifying the tension. "I booked this room tonight because I believe in the importance of environment," he began, his voice calm and resonant. "A space can define the nature of the conversation held within it. This room, for instance, it's about clarity, about seeing things from a great height. Chloe, you and Julian have spent a lot of time in this hotel recently. You seem to enjoy it." Chloe stiffened. "We've had some business meetings here, yes," she said a little too quickly. "It's a first-class establishment." Julian jumped in, eager to take control of the narrative. "A testament to what quality and vision can create. The service is impeccable," he smiled at Chloe. "They treat their guests like royalty." "I'm glad you think so," Liam said. "I've always found that the best service is invisible. It anticipates your needs before you're even aware of them. For instance, when a valued guest uses a credit card, the system is designed for maximum efficiency. No fas, no dilas." He slid his gaze to Chloe. Her smile faltered. She sensed a shift in the current, the gentle pull of an undertow she couldn't see. "Speaking of which," Liam continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more intimate, more dangerous. "I received a notification a few days ago. For a charge. On my card. Your supplementary card, Chloe. It was for $4,872.50. From this hotel. For the presidential suite, a spa package, and a rather significant amount of room service." The air in the room instantly became thin, hard to breathe. Eleanor's hand flew to her pearls. Marcus's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Richard finally looked up from the wine list, his eyes wide. Chloe's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. It must be a mistake. Fraud. It was a weak, panicked lie, and everyone knew it." "There's no mistake," Liam said softly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single sheet of paper, placing it on the table. It was a printed copy of the credit card statement. "The charge is right here, and the hotel has confirmed the cardholder's identity. The security footage from the check-in desk is quite clear." Chloe stared at the paper, then at Liam, her eyes darting around the table like a trapped animal. She looked at Julian for support, but his confidence had evaporated. His face was a mask of dawning horror. He was beginning to understand that this was not a surrender. It was an ambush. "This is a private matter, Liam," Chloe stammered, trying to regain some semblance of control. "This is inappropriate. Humiliating. Humiliating." Liam repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. The quiet bomb had been dropped. The fuse was lit. "We're just getting to that part." He gestured to the leather folders in front of them. "Please, open them." Hesitantly, they reached for the folders. Chloe's fingers trembled as she opened the cover. Inside, the first page was not a financial document or a legal notice. It was a high-resolution photograph. It was a picture of her and Julian, laughing as they toasted with champagne flutes on the balcony of the presidential suite. A picture taken by a discreet, long-lens camera from an adjacent building. Chloe gasped, dropping the folder as if it had burned her. The others stared at their own copies, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. The trap had been sprung. They were not here for a negotiation. They were here for a reckoning. The silence that followed the revelation of the photograph was dense and suffocating. It was the silence of a world reordering itself, of long-held certainties crumbling to dust. Chloe stared at Liam, her face a canvas of disbelief and fury. Her family looked from the photograph to Liam, their expressions shifting from shock to a dawning, sickening understanding. This was not the broken man they had mocked at their dinner table. This was someone else entirely. "What is this, Liam?" Chloe finally whispered, her voice trembling with a rage that was quickly being consumed by fear. "Did you have us followed? Is this some kind of sick game?" "It's not a game," Liam replied, his voice still unervingly calm. He walked slowly around the table, his presence dominating the room. "It's a clarification. For years, I've existed in a narrative you've all carefully constructed for me. Liam, the failed dreamer, the husband to be pitied, the man who aimed too high and fell too far. You've dined out on that story. You've used it to fortify your own sense of superiority." He stopped behind Marcus's chair. "You, Marcus, you asked if I was back in university, competing for gift certificates. You mocked the idea of doing charitable work because it didn't come with a flashy commission." He moved to stand behind Eleanor. "You, Eleanor, you've looked at me with such profound disappointment, as if my very presence was a stain on your family's reputation. You spoke of my little venture as if it were a child's lemonade stand that had gone out of business." He paused behind Richard, who refused to meet his gaze, staring intently at the polished surface of the table. "And you, Richard, you said nothing. Your silence was the most damning indictment of all. You stood by and watched your wife and son sharpen their knives, and you never once spoke a word in my defense. You enabled them." Finally, he returned to the head of the table, his eyes locking onto Chloe's. "And you, my wife, you were the chief architect of this fiction. You offer me up for ridicule to make yourself feel better, to justify your own betrayals. You brought this man," he gestured dismissively toward Julian, "into our lives and presented him as the standard I could never meet. You did it all while living in a home I designed, spending money you thought was a dwindling inheritance." He let his words sink in, a litany of grievances delivered not with heat, but with the cold, hard finality of a judge's sentence. "So no, Chloe, this is not a game. It's time for the truth. You all seem to admire this hotel so much. You praise its luxury, its design, its vision." He paused, letting the silence build to an unbearable pressure. "I'm glad you like it, because I own it." The statement landed. Simple, devastating, final. Marcus let out an involuntary, strangled laugh of disbelief. "You what? You own the you're insane." Liam smiled, a thin, mirthless smile. "Am I?" "Turn to the next page in your folders." With trembling hands, they did. The page contained the official corporate registration for the Grand Elysian Hotel Group. Listed at the top, under Chairman and CEO, was a name they did not recognize: Ethelred Holdings Incorporated. The next page was the registration for Ethelred Holdings. And there, listed as the sole director and 100% shareholder, was his name, Liam Sterling. A collective gasp went through the room. Eleanor's face went ashen. Marcus's jaw hung open, his face a comical picture of stupefaction. Richard finally looked up, his eyes filled with a dawning, horrifying respect. "It's not just this hotel," Liam continued, his voice taking on the dispassionate tone of a lecturer. "It's the entire chain. It's the office block your firm leases downtown, Marcus. It's the commercial property your favorite restaurant is on, Eleanor. My little venture didn't fail. It went private. It became the foundation of a portfolio worth over $2 billion. I didn't fail. I just became invisible." He then turned his full attention to Julian, who was trying to shrink into his chair, to disappear. "And now, we come to you, Julian," Liam said, his voice turning to ice. "The doer, the man who sells buildings for 8 figures. You've been telling Chloe, and I assume the Vance family, that you're brokering the sale of their company, Vance Imports, for a very generous sum." Julian swallowed hard, unable to speak. "The problem with that story," Liam said, "is that Vance Imports is no longer for sale. Because it's already been sold. Or rather, it has been acquired. 3 days ago, the primary lender for Vance Imports, a bank which had been carrying a significant amount of the company's debt, called in its loans. The company defaulted, and per a prior agreement, a private equity firm has exercised its option to acquire the company's assets to cover the debt. He paused again, the master of dramatic timing. That private equity firm is a subsidiary of Ethelred Holdings. As of 72 hours ago, I own Vance Imports. I own your family's legacy, Richard. The final piece of the devastating puzzle clicked into place. The room was silent, save for the sound of Chloe's ragged breathing. They were all looking at him now, not as Liam the failure, but as a stranger, a man of immense, hidden power who had lived among them, watching, waiting. The moral mirror he held up was flawless, reflecting back at them not just their cruelty and arrogance, but their profound, catastrophic blindness. They hadn't just underestimated him. They had never even seen him at all. The aftermath of Liam's revelation was not an explosion, but an implosion. The arrogance and bluster that had filled the room just moments before collapsed inward, leaving a vacuum of silent, breathless horror. The power dynamic had not just shifted. It had been inverted with such brutal, absolute force that it left the Van Cess and Julian Croft gasping for air in a new and terrifying atmosphere. Chloe was the first to break. A choked sob escaped her lips. "Liam, I don't understand," she stammered, looking at the corporate documents as if they were written in a language she couldn't comprehend. "This can't be real." "It's the only thing that has been real for the past 5 years," Liam replied, his voice devoid of triumph. He sounded weary, like a man who had carried a great weight for too long and was finally setting it down. "The life you thought we were living, the man you thought I was, that was the fiction. This is the reality." Julian, seeing his entire world of smoke and mirrors disintegrating, made a desperate lurch towards self-preservation. He pushed a chair back and stood up, trying to muster some of his old, brash confidence. "Look, this is a misunderstanding between a husband and wife. It has nothing to do with me. I was misled." He pointed a trembling finger at Chloe. "She told me she was separated." Liam's gaze flickered to him, cold and dismissive. "Sit down, Mr. Croft. It wasn't a request." "I think I'll be leaving," Julian blustered, turning toward the door. "I don't think you will," Liam said calmly. He pressed a small, discreet button on the underside of the table. A moment later, the door to the sovereign room opened, and 2 large men in sharp, dark suits entered. They were not aggressive, but their presence was an immovable fact. They were hotel security, but they carried the quiet authority of men who protected more than just property. "Mr. Croft is just leaving," Liam said to the head of security. "Please escort him from the premises. He is no longer welcome at any Ethelred Holdings property. And please have a legal courier deliver this to him on his way out." Liam slid a thin envelope across the table. It contained a cease and desist letter for misrepresenting himself as an agent in the sale of Vance Imports, and a detailed invoice for every complimentary item he had consumed in the hotel, now uncomped and due immediately. The total was north of $30,000. Julian's face turned a blotchy, mottled red. He looked from Liam to the security men and back again. The fight went out of him completely. Defeated, he allowed himself to be escorted from the room without another word, a hollow man stripped of his last illusion. With Julian gone, the focus returned to the family. Eleanor was weeping silently into a silk napkin, not for her daughter's betrayal, but for the catastrophic social and financial implications. The public ruin was what horrified her. Marcus was staring at Liam, a strange new expression on his face. The contempt was gone, replaced by a raw, naked fear. He was a man who understood power and money, and he was realizing he was in the presence of a force he couldn't comprehend. "You own our company," he whispered. "I do," Liam confirmed. "And tomorrow morning, I will be exercising my right as the new owner to replace the entire board of directors. Your position, Marcus, is redundant, as is yours, Richard." Richard, who had been catatonically still, finally spoke. His voice was a dry rasp. Why, Liam? Why would it go this far? The company my father built, that company. Liam looked at his father-in-law, and for the first time, a flicker of something other than cold resolve entered his eyes. It was a trace of the old disappointment. I gave you every chance, Richard. For years, I sat at your table and endured their scorn. I waited for you, the patriarch, the man I once respected, to show an ounce of integrity. To say, enough, you never did. You let them chip away at my dignity, and you let them chip away at your own honor in the process. You thought my failure was the problem. You never realized your silence was the real rot in your family's foundation. Finally, he turned to Chloe. She was looking at him now with a desperate, pleading intensity. The contempt was gone, replaced by a terrified, frantic desire to rewind time. Liam, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. I made a mistake. A terrible, horrible mistake. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. We can fix this. I love you. I do, I love you. Liam listened to the words, but they were hollow, meaningless. It wasn't love she was mourning. It was the loss of a future she had just discovered. The loss of the status and wealth she had always craved, which had been right in front of her the whole time, hidden behind a face she had refused to truly see. No, Chloe, he said, his voice gentle but absolute. You don't love me. You love what I have, and you've just demonstrated that you are unworthy of both. Our marriage is over. I'll have my lawyer send your lawyer the papers tomorrow. He turned and walked toward the door, leaving them in the silent, opulent room that was a monument to his success and their failure. He paused at the threshold and looked back at the wreckage of the Vance family, huddled together at the massive table. By the way, he added, his final word on the matter, the dinner is on the house. He walked out, leaving the door open behind him, letting the sounds of the bustling, indifferent city drift into the tomb-like silence of the sovereign room. The weeks following the dinner at the Grand Elysian were a slow, methodical dismantling of the Vance family's world. Liam was not cruel or vindictive in his actions. He was simply precise. The consequences that befell them were the natural, logical outcomes of their own choices, a perfect and terrible kind of poetic justice. As promised, the board of Vance Imports was dissolved. Marcus was fired, his company credit cards canceled, and his corner office cleared out. He was left with nothing but a severance package dictated by the minimum legal requirement. Stripped of his title and the inherited power he had worn like a second skin, he was adrift. Reports from mutual acquaintances painted a picture of a man spiraling, spending his days in expensive bars he could no longer afford, trying to recapture a sense of importance that had vanished overnight. His bluster was gone, replaced by a bitter, resentful confusion. He couldn't grasp how the world he had mastered had been so easily taken from him. Eleanor's punishment was, in many ways, more severe. Her currency was social standing, and overnight, she was bankrupt. The news of the hostile takeover of Vance Imports, coupled with the scandalous rumors of Chloe's affair and the dramatic confrontation at the Elysian, details of which inevitably leaked from shell-shock hotel staff, made them pariahs. Invitations to galas and charity balls dried up. Friends stopped returning her calls. The empire of influence she had spent a lifetime building was gone. She and Richard were forced to put their cold, glass-and-stone mansion on the market to cover their debts, a humiliating public admission of their fall from grace. Eleanor, who had once judged Liam for his perceived lack of success, was now facing a future of genuine obscurity. Chloe's fate was the most profound. Liam's divorce filing was swift and non-negotiable. Their prenuptial agreement, which she had insisted upon at the height of her family's power, was ironclad. It was designed to protect her family's assets from the failed architect. It had never occurred to her that it would one day be used to protect his assets from her. She was left with only what she had entered the marriage with, a small trust fund of her own, now woefully inadequate for the lifestyle she had taken for granted. She was forced to move into a small, generic apartment in a less fashionable part of the city. The designer clothes and luxury car were gone, sold to cover legal fees. She tried to find work, but she had no discernible skills beyond spending money and cultivating a sense of superiority. She was forced, for the first time in her life, to confront herself without the armor of wealth and status. The reflection in the mirror was that of a stranger, a woman who had thrown away a life of unimaginable privilege because she had been unable to see the value in the quiet, steady man who had offered it to her. Amidst this fallout, Liam extended one single olive branch. He called Richard. He found his father-in-law, not at the mansion, but at a modest hotel, having separated from Eleanor in the wake of their financial and social collapse. They met at a simple, quiet coffee shop, a world away from the opulence of the Sovereign Room. Richard looked older, diminished. The mask of indifference had been replaced by a deep, weary sadness. "I don't know what you want me to say, Liam," Richard began, his voice hoarse. "Congratulations. You won." "This was never a contest, Richard," Liam said, stirring his coffee. "This was about a reckoning, about accountability." He leaned forward slightly. "I called you here because, unlike the others, I believe there might be something left in you to salvage. You stood by while your family rotted from the inside out. You chose comfort over character. But the choice is not yet final." Richard looked up, confused. "What choice?" "I am restructuring Vance Imports," Liam explained. "I'm not going to gut it and sell it for parts. That's not my way. The company has good bones, good people. Your father built something of quality. It was your mismanagement and Marcus's arrogance that nearly destroyed it. I'm going to rebuild it, make it stronger, more efficient." He took a sip of his coffee. "I need people who understand the business, people who know the routes, the suppliers, the clients. I'm offering you a position, not as CEO, not as a board member, as a logistics consultant. You'll report to the new president. It will be a job, Richard, with a salary. You'll have to work for it. You'll have to earn your place every single day." Richard was stunned into silence. It was an offer of redemption, but it came with a steep price: his pride. He would have to go back to the company his father founded as a mere employee, working for the very man his family had tried to destroy. "What?" Richard asked, his voice barely a whisper. "After everything, why would you offer me anything?" "Because your father was a good man," Liam said simply. "He was a friend of my father's. They worked on a construction site together when they were young, before he started the company. He believed in building things, not just owning them. I'm offering you a chance to honor his legacy instead of the one you, Eleanor, and Marcus created. A chance to choose integrity over arrogance." Liam stood up, placing a business card on the table. It was for the new president of Vance Imports. "The offer is on the table for 1 week. After that, I move on. The choice is yours, Richard. You can go down with the ship your wife and son sank, or you can help me build a new one from the wreckage." He left Richard sitting alone in the coffee shop, staring at the small, rectangular card that represented his last, and perhaps only, chance at redemption. The choice was his to make: cling to the tattered remnants of his old life, or embrace the humiliating, humbling, and ultimately healing path toward a new one. 6 months passed. The city, which had been the stage for the drama, moved on, its memory short, its gaze fixed on the future. The seasons turned. Autumn's crisp air gave way to the quiet blanket of winter, and then to the tentative green shoots of spring. For Liam, it was a season of quiet, focused reconstruction, both in business and in his own life. He stood on a muddy construction site on the city's industrial waterfront. The plans for the new community arts center, the very project Marcus had mocked, unfurled on the hood of his truck. He had not only won the design competition, he had anonymously funded the entire project through one of his charitable foundations. The steel skeleton of the building was already rising against the gray sky, a testament to a promise kept. He was no longer just an architect of buildings, but an architect of second chances. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Anya with a weekly summary. Ethelred Holdings was thriving. The Grand Elysian chain had posted record profits, and Vance Imports, under its new management, had stabilized and was already showing signs of a remarkable turnaround. A small note at the bottom of the summary caught his eye. Richard Vance has accepted the consultant position. His first quarterly performance review is positive. He is, by all accounts, working diligently. Liam smiled faintly. Richard had made his choice. He had swallowed his pride, left Eleanor and her toxic world behind, and had chosen to work. He had chosen to build something again. Liam had seen him once, from a distance, at the Vance Imports warehouse. He was thinner, grayer, but he stood straighter. He was talking to a forklift driver, pointing at a manifest, looking not like a fallen king, but like a man with a purpose. Their relationship would never be what it once was, but a foundation of quiet, mutual respect was being laid, one earned day at a time. As for Chloe, her fall had been as complete as it was deserved. Liam heard about her through the grapevine of old, shared acquaintances. She had taken a job as a retail assistant in a department store, a humbling, exhausting reality for a woman who had once been the store's best customer. The reports were that she was quiet, withdrawn, and looked perpetually tired. The fire of her arrogance had been extinguished, leaving behind only the cold ashes of regret. One afternoon, Liam received an email from an unfamiliar address. It was from her. The message was short, stripped of all her former artifice. Liam, it read, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for the affair, not for the money. I'm sorry I never saw you. I was so busy looking for something shiny, I missed the gold right in front of me. I hope one day you can be happy. You deserve it." He read the email, and for the first time, he felt a flicker of something akin to pity. He did not reply. There was nothing left to say. Her apology was not for him. It was for her. It was a necessary step in her own long journey toward finding a self worth valuing, a self that existed independently of a price tag. He hoped, for her sake, that she would find it. His own happiness was no longer tied to her forgiveness or her downfall. It was being built right here in the steel and glass rising from the mud. He folded the blueprints and looked out at the city skyline. In the distance, the Grand Elysian Hotel pierced the clouds, a glittering monument to a life he had built in the shadows. He no longer needed the shadows. He had brought his two worlds together, integrating the quiet, thoughtful architect with the decisive, powerful businessman. He was finally whole. He had learned that true strength wasn't about flaunting power, but about having the patience and integrity to wield it justly. He hadn't sought revenge. He had sought balance. He had simply held up a mirror, and the world had righted itself. The fall of the House of Vance was not his victory. It was a testament to a simple, immutable law of physics, a structure built on a foundation of arrogance, without integrity to support it, will inevitably collapse under its own weight. He had simply been the one to point out the cracks. And so we come to the end of Liam's story. It's a powerful reminder that a person's true worth is never what you see on the surface. It's in their character, their integrity, and the quiet strength they show when no one is watching. Liam didn't need to be cruel. He simply let the truth do the work, and in the end, found a peace that was more valuable than any fortune. What do you think? Was Liam's response justified, or did he go too far? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see the different perspectives on stories like this. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If you found this story compelling, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to the channel for more content just like this. Your support means the world and allows me to keep bringing these narratives to you. Until next time, remember to be kind, be patient, and never underestimate the quiet ones.